Even BJ
Welcome
based.
to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission as we strive to be better together. Hey everybody, welcome back to The Gold Mine. We have another fantastic show for you with no planning whatsoever. We're going to do Free Flow Part 2, but before we get into that, you guys need to do some things. First off, you need to hit the buttons, like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all that good stuff. Get your emails when we go live, which is, of course, Wednesdays for The Gold Mine and Fridays for The Collective. If you have any thoughts, questions, comments, anything, put them up in the comment section throughout so we can engage those. And on top of that, we have the new reinforcement loop newsletter. So make sure that you get onto either the website or you hit me up, DM me, or comment on the post that I put out a couple of days ago. And that way you can stay in the loop every week and get additional wisdom, not just from the guests, not just from Shaun, but amalgamated. So I am stoked for that one. And other than that, I'm pretty excited. Seb, how you doing down south?
I'm good, man. Things are peachy. Getting ready to hit up that jiu-jitsu retreat over in Tulum, the veterans retreat, the BJJ one. And yeah, man, it'll be 2 weeks of unfeathered, well, 1 week of BJJ and 1 week of unfeathered time off on the coast of Playa del Carmen. Looking forward to that.
I really, really was hoping that I could get down there this year. This week specifically is the 1 week my wife can't take off. Just like there's no way I could make it down for this last week of March, and it is killing me. But quickly, Lisa Lemire jumped on here in the Instagram. Hey, Lisa, how you doing? Shaun, how's life in the mountains treating you?
Things are good. What's Lisa got on the go?
I don't know. She just said hello, everyone. That was as far as it goes.
That was free flow, buddy. Free flow.
Free flow. I'm liking it. Well, so last week we got into some really interesting conversations, and I want to dive right back into them. So there were 3 points that came up that we said, you know what, we should really touch on these again, and we should hit these up. So we got taking a leap of faith, we got antennas, and we got surrender. And I'm going to pass it to Seb and say, which one do you want to touch on first?
I don't really want to touch any of those. I think they're landmines. I don't think there's a win here. No, I'm
Leave
just
it to the
teasing.
engineer to put landmines out for you. Here you go.
I thought you were supposed to remove them.
We put them down too. It's a both thing. But go ahead.
Yeah.
Hit us.
Yeah, I think just to summarize a bit of the conversation, I think it was just, it was just an acknowledgement and a conversation about the fact that there are clearly spiritual underpinnings and all kinds of things that are rationally not always explainable when it comes to this life journey, and that an over rationalization of things can create several issues with respect to navigating the landscape of life, really. And so it could be as simple as having faith that some of the efforts that we've put in are going to pay off. If with respect to having put it out in the universe and acting in good faith and investing, and sometimes things don't always turn out that way. And sometimes they don't always happen when we want them to. Sometimes they happen when they ought to. But generally speaking, there are a certain force at play that I think are pretty undeniable, and I think that to go through life rationalizing absolutely everything and trying to make sense logically of this life journey can be a detriment. And there are certain instances where it is necessary and it has to happen. But I think that having an understanding that isn't always the case is probably a revelation for some.
That's a great place to start. Shaun, what do you got?
So leap of faith, taking the leap of faith, is that kind of, do you want to jump into that?
Yeah, let's do that.
Intended. So leap of faith. I suppose one of the things that is thrown around when the term leap of faith is injected into a sentence, it often has like not a negative connotation, but it has sort of a like, oh, you're really going to have a leap of faith? Oh, are you sure you want to leap that faith. I don't look at it that way. I really don't. In fact, let me give a perfect example of the most recent quote unquote leap of faith the podcast just went through. It was on the weekend. Friday, the newsletter didn't exist. Monday, there was a brand spanking new newsletter that was emailed out to a bunch of people Monday night. So in just over 48 hours, we quote unquote leaped of faith into creating from nothing a newsletter based on people asking us to. Now, will it turn into anything? Will it be of any value? I don't know. I'm not the one to judge that. But who I am is a guy who leapt with some faith. And I didn't do it by myself, by the way. Chance was alongside of me. And what we decided to do was create something with our curiosity. We had a blank slate, a general commander's intent, and then we just freaking started kicking that arse. And so Monday night, something was produced. And the leap, as far as I'm concerned, was fun. I mean, it was work. I mean, we poured a bunch of hours into it. We really did. And it wasn't easy, but it was fun. Fun for me because I'm doing something that is worthwhile for others. And I think the leap of faith aspect, in order for you to really grasp that there's no risk in the leap, is because you're generally doing it for others. I mean, you're doing it for yourself for sure. But in this case, on the weekend, it was 100% for others, not for Chance and I. And so the leap of faith, I think, can be driven initially by doing it for something outside of yourself rather than inside of yourself. But honestly, the magic for me is it starts kind of with yourself. And so let me kind of position something. And it'll be kind of controversial. I was thinking of it like just as Seb was wrapping up a couple of minutes ago on faith and who or what I have faith in. I have faith in myself. And that's all I need. Because if I have belief in myself to make the right choices, then the life around me is a result of me having faith in myself. That doesn't mean that I don't have faith in other things. But for me, it starts with me. I've got to believe in this life that I'm living and the choices that I make. And the choices I've made have brought me to this point where I have faith in my friends. I have faith in this podcast. I have faith in the newsletter. I have faith in a lot of external things, to include spiritual faith. But again, controversially, I believe I have to start with myself. Faith in Shaun. Because if I don't have faith in me, then what?
That's a good place to go. While you were talking, I was thinking that the faith aspect within your own self, that's the first real leap in life, is when you can bet on yourself, at least in my point of view. And that comes through diving into something, diving into the unknown. That's really what it is all about, right? And if you can actively dive into the unknown of yourself, who am I? Why am I here? What am I doing? All these questions, if you can engage those questions and start working there, then those apply everywhere else. It's that inner cordon, outer cordon kind of setup where you start right at the beginning and you work your way out. Seb, you got any thoughts?
Sorry, and based on that Chance, I have to clarify this before Seb tears me apart for having too much faith in myself, because I don't. That's the irony of things. That is the irony. That I've got to have faith in myself, but my imposter syndrome doesn't allow me to have too much faith. And so it's a constant work in progress. Like, I know I'm not a big deal. And so I try to make myself to be a big deal in my own eyes to some degree, without the sort of the requirement of everyone to recognize that I'm doing big deal stuff. Whether I'm doing big deal stuff or not is neither here nor there. I've got to believe that I'm doing big deal stuff, or then what's it all about? then I'm focused on a life of mediocrity that doesn't produce anything for others, that isn't of note to me. I'm simply mouth breathing my way through life, and then I die. And that's just not my jam. I'm here for a reason. We're all here for a reason. And I'm trying to figure out what my reason is. And every day that I get closer to the reason, like I double down on that reason. I double down on me. I double down on the faith in whichever direction I'm going, are choices that I make, supported by my beliefs, and they're for good reasons, not for bad reasons. And so the internal aspect of faith isn't like trying to pump myself up, and it isn't trying to glorify my existence. What it is Shaun trying to figure out who he is in this grand scheme of things called life. And so if I don't start with internal faith with I'm here for a reason, then what, you know?
Yeah, I'm tracking. We got a comment on the Instagram side. Says DR7606 jumps in, says, believe in yourself, but be honest with yourself, which I think is a interesting way to put it. Sab, you got any thoughts?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, lots. You know, in order to navigate this world and this life that we're in, we need to have self-belief. We need to navigate this specifically. I think where the danger comes into play is when it becomes self-love, self-love in the sense that you now start venerating your own persona and thinking that you have a lot more control over certain things than you actually do. And I used to teach in my leadership courses the sphere of controls, right? Because when people have anxiety, oftentimes you will see they spend a lot of their time in things they absolutely cannot control. And one of the things that I quickly realized over the last couple of years is that you have spheres of influence is what you have. There is no real control. We're flying on a ball of water around the universe in some sort of weird pattern, and we don't have any control, over things. We have influence over our reality. And I think that, of course, there's a philosophical debate here that we could have all day, but I think it's safe to say that it is important to have some sense of self-belief so that you can navigate the world around you and that you can invest and that having faith alone and say, and I refer to spiritual forces, but I mean, Shaun is right. It's not all about spirituality. There's other types of faith. But imagine if you do have faith in something or someone or whatever the case may be, and you go, okay, I'm just going to sit here and wait till everything happens. Yeah, good luck, right? Like you can have faith, but you're not actually navigating the landscape, which is the things that you have to do on the daily to make certain things happen. But what's interesting in the conversation is how, when Shaun says, I have faith that things will turn out, and I have faith that when I'm doing it for the collective, I understand I know I'm doing it for some. So he knows. So the question is what does he know? And I don't, it's not a question that we need to necessarily answer, but the fact is there is something there. It's like, what is it? That's what's difficult to kind of quantify or explain. But why is it that that doing this for the collective is actually something that you ought to do? Because people have said, I benefited from it. I doubt it. It's deeper than that. That's a surface level reaction from the people in relation to something that you've put out in the universe. But somehow, somewhere along the lines, you've accomplished certain things, you've done certain things, and you know that when you do it for the collective, it reacts differently somehow, and that's the piece, that's the underpinning that's very hard to put a finger on and say, those are the reasons. But I think a lot of people walk around thinking, what about me? What about me? And what about me? And that works the complete opposite of how you want it to work. Yes, you need to take care of yourself. I'm not suggesting you should be, expending all of your bandwidth on other people if you don't have anything to give. That's sort of the airplane analogy of putting your mask first before you can help other. But sometimes when you're spending too much time and there's so much sort of egocentrism there, you end up, believing your own hype, so to speak, and you're not going anywhere. You're spinning in circle and you're not getting anything out of this life. And then you start expanding and you start being there for other people. And then you realize, man, there's something that's very viscerally gratifying in a real sense, in doing that. And so, and then you get into this loop where if everything you do is for the collective to avoid dealing with some of your things, then it's another area where you can get sucked in. So there's a lot of nuance there. But at the end of the day, when we talk about cosmic neutrality and all of these concepts that, a good macrodose will get you familiar with, you can go, we know that balance is the key. Balance. And that is what we generally have a really hard time establishing as humans. It's all out that way or completely out that way,
Yeah. This is, when you guys were both talking, I wrote down one thing: free falling. And Shaun, you'll have to correct me if I'm right on this one, but it seems to me like when you are in free fall, there's a certain level of influence that you have, right? Like you can maneuver around and you can change directions and spin and do all these things, but you're still falling, right? Like the direction is still down. So I'm wondering on this specifically, the basically attributing that, whether or not that is a good analogy of free falling to the leap of faith, in that you have to steer kind of, but not be in control. Like you're not flying, you're just falling with style, I guess. What do you think, Shaun?
You know what? Possibly one of the best analogies you've pulled up in quite a long time, I believe. And it's not that your other analogies are bad. I'm just saying this one's really good. And for the following reason, in my opinion. So let's just consider the subject, the whole subject. No nuance right now. Just the very big subject of free flow. You can look at that from a science perspective, where there was a lot of studies and a lot of athletes, a lot of subject matter experts, chess masters, just a lot of people who are high performers in their particular subject matter of expertise. And they understand flow because at one point in their life on day one, they were in a helicopter or a plane about to jump out for their first free fall in whatever they're about to engage in, chess or whatever. And on day one, you just freaking fall. And sometimes the only thing that saves you is your automatic opening device, your AOD, that pops off at the set height, because you didn't have the skills, you didn't have the wherewithal, you didn't have the presence to control the moment. So free flow initially starts off as it is so free flowing that you don't even have a structure around it. You don't even understand what's going on. It is upside down chaos sometimes as you tumble out of that plane the first time. However, after a few, you start to understand that when you fall out of that plane, eventually you gain something called terminal velocity. Terminal velocity is the rate of fall that you reach, the maximum rate of fall that you can get in skydiving based on friction and gravity, air friction, all of these things. You reach a speed where typically you don't go any faster than that. You're at a stable, fast fall rate, so that when you're falling, you can just do this, bunk, and you turn in a 360. Bunk, you turn in a 360. You want to turn a 720, it's this. Bump. Now there's the 720 that you turn in the air. But in order to make moves in the air, you've got to make them at terminal velocity to make them highly effective and efficient. If you've just fallen out of the plane and you don't have terminal velocity, it takes big efforts to make small movements in the air. And it's because you're just not going fast enough. Like day one of any skill, you don't have enough velocity. You don't even understand velocity of the thing that you're getting into. And therefore, you're flippity flopping in the air just like your first time free fall. You don't understand the air. You have something in the future called air awareness that you don't have on day one. It is that understanding of your relative position in time and space in any moment, which is humans, we're supposed to have all the time. Right now, I understand where I am on my chair in my office space in this moment with the podcast, just as we're all supposed to be aware of the moment that we're in. What is interesting about free fall is because it's so intense, it makes you really aware of the moment that you're living. That second, that next second, things slow down, and each tick of the second hand is wow, 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 I'm upside down. Now I'm right side up. Now I'm upside down. Now I'm right side up. That flippity flop of out of control in the air first jump stretches out almost into a lifetime. For some people, they will say when they land on the ground, they've never been more alive. But nothing changed. Maybe they weren't alive before they got on the plane. Once they got on the plane and landed on the ground, now they realized they're alive. But really, nothing's changed. They're still breathing, they're still blinking, they're still swallowing. But their perception has changed significantly. Their breathing rate hasn't changed. Their perception of life has changed. And so free flow in free fall is interesting because, again, to gain control, you've got to do a whole bunch of out of control jumps until finally you can understand how to control your terminal velocity. By the way, the irony of that statement is we're all on a terminal velocity. I mean, pick a year that you're going to die. You're heading towards it. Pick a year. That's terminal velocity. And so get stable now or don't. How do you want to flip-flop through life? Do you want to go through it stably, cutting fast movements? Or do you want to arrive at the terminal velocity moment without a parachute?
Nothing quite like arriving at terminal velocity without a parachute. Now, I have a question directly on this, and I think this is it's just a fantastic question from Satch, and I'm going to pass the mic to Seb here first when I read this out. He says, how does one believe in themselves when they may be stepping into something they have never done or experienced? How does one create the belief in themselves? And at least when I read this, as you were talking, Shaun, it clicked in my head of like taking that first step out of the plane. I believe that's what he's going after, but what do you think, Seb?
Well, man, that's a existential question, right? Like, and this is where engaging in life wholeheartedly and taking the not necessarily the path of least resistance is the easy way to go. But if you wanna grow a belief in yourself, you're gonna have to step out of comfort. And we've heard this all the time. But what does that actually mean in actuality? And it applies to all the realms of life. It's not just I must do something crazy, like like in Sasha's case, a run, or in somebody else's case, jumping in an MMA cage or whatever. Like there's a lot more to this whole life journey in all the other realms. And every day we play it safe for the most part. And sometimes we inject a little something that we want to do so that we can sort of prove to ourselves that we're capable of taking something on that's challenging, that's difficult. And now we prove something to ourselves. But I think just like anything else, just like preparing for adversity, belief in yourself is acquired over time through actions and results that you are getting from those actions. And so it takes time. It just doesn't happen miraculously. And if you've projected an image of yourself that isn't in line with the actions that you have taken, now you have to convince yourself that you're that person. And that's a big problem. And it's interesting because it's very prevalent. It's very prevalent to project a certain image that give us a certain amount of, dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin, and cool story. That's not necessarily who you are if you look at the work that you have put in. And so that's not to say that somebody that's put in a ton of work doesn't have imposter syndrome. Shaun talked about this earlier, because we also know that if you have too much belief in yourself and you're not that guy, you probably won't be introspective enough to even know that you should be worried about what's coming down, and so imposter syndrome is something that tends to hit high performers a lot, and there's a reason for that. But there is some overriding that needs to happen there. So the question is you never get to a destination where the belief in yourself is cemented to the point where you never question it. I do not believe that ever. And if you do, good luck. Good luck, everybody. Because I think that it is critically important that we have this inner battle with ourselves. And this is what generally high performers will have. People think that Olympians, gold medal Olympians, have it all figured out, and they don't battle the same demons as everybody else does. I would say they probably battle more demons because they have added pressure, because there's an expectations as a result of how much they generally perform, the tracking history on them, and all of those things. And some of them could go into hiding for the rest 20 years because they've accomplished more than most people. But yet they do struggle with the exact same thing. So it becomes a question of overriding mechanisms. What do you know? What do you know about yourself? You know that life happens. Things don't always materialize the way you want them to. You know that you're going to give everything you have, and you're going to do it for the right reasons, which is not posturing or self, inflation. It's for a task, in Sasha's case, it's for the collective and a very important cause. And so when you start stacking all these things, what is the worst case scenario here? What is the worst case scenario? The worst case scenario is that you fail miserably while attempting to do something for others, something that nobody else has taken on. And I bring it back to Ezran. I don't even know if he's referring to this, but this is an easy example to use, right? And so your belief is not concrete. Your self-belief is that you're going to negotiate the reality as it unfolds in front of you with the amount of efforts that you have put in relation to an event or a task that you're engaging in. That is all you can ask of yourself. Sphere of influence, sphere of controls,
I'm digging it. I'm digging this. I was thinking about it, the way it's worded here, and I want to get your thoughts on this, Shaun, in a second here, is that the belief in themselves, I don't think, is the crux of the matter. It's the belief in the object that you're doing. Like, whatever it is you're trying to do should be the belief. The rest of it, I'm just thinking of podcasting in general. When I first started, I did not believe in myself that I should be podcasting, but I believed in the mission, which was there's information that I'm gaining from the people that I'm talking to that need to be passed on. I have to pass that. That's the mission that I believed in. Was it, am I going to do it well? Probably not. Was it I'm going to be a friggin' superstar in a second? Like, I'm going to be the next Joe Rogan? No. It was the mission in of itself. What is it that I'm trying to do? That's where the belief came in. It wasn't really creating a belief in myself. The belief in myself came years later when someone comes up and, hey man, I love your show. It really helped me, did this, and this. Or when Shaun came and said, hey man, I want to set up something. Let's create the collective. And we did. It's after the fact, at least I see where the belief in oneself comes in, but the belief in the mission is what gets you off that first step, was like, I got to get this done because the mission is more important. Shaun, what do you think?
I'll take a different approach. It's not that I disagree with anyone at all. I'm not taking a position. I'm just simply going to take a different approach. And it's this: when I'm stepping into something new, how do I believe that I'm going to have some success in it, or I'm going to add some value in it, or it's worthy of my time, and therefore I'm going to improve whatever it is that I'm stepping into? So how do I believe in myself? Well, I think it only takes one thing, and that is engage in something, kick its ass, put that notch on your belt, and there's your first notch. I believe in myself because I engaged in this and I did what I came here to do. 1. After that, every notch that you put on your belt, strike. Another 5. Another 5. Every notch you put on your belt is just a confirmation that you believe in yourself. Like, I believe in myself. It doesn't mean that I believe that I'm going to create the best newsletter in the world. It doesn't mean that the podcast is going to be a success. Those things are nice to haves, but they aren't what motivates me. What motivates me is my why. And then the rest is, I believe that I can make it happen because I've got a track record of making things happen. This is going to sound really weird. Now, I'm reluctant to say it, but it's actually kind of it's a little practical exercise that I'm running on myself right now in real time, like trying to own this believe in yourself nonsense. So I was down in I was down in California in January with my buddy, and 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 we were talking about a lot of different things. We used to work together in a number of different roles, and he said, "Hey, you know what? I think you should know this." And I said, "What?" And he said, and I'm paraphrasing now. He said, "You know, like some, not some, lots of people ask me about you, Shaun, and our relationship through the past and the things that we've done together and how you helped me on this and that." And he said, "Here's how I describe you. If you get involved with Shaun, anything he touches turns to gold." And that's hilarious to me because I never think that way. Here's what I think: I'll dig for gold for as long as it takes. I'll pan for gold. As much effort as it takes, I'll dig and I'll pan. Touching is easy. Hard work is where the gold comes from. Now, I don't think anything I touch turns to gold. What I do believe is that I'll work like a dog until I find those gold nuggets in whatever I'm doing. And so if I've got someone who's lined up next to me, like my friend down in California, if he says, "Hey, I want to learn how to become a computer system engineer," well, guess what? We're about to touch gold because we'll both work like dogs until we're standing in the gold mine with all the gold. That's how I think. You can't have anything in life without panning for it. You can't have the gold medallion hanging around your neck unless you've dug for it. If you've got gold in your life and it came free or too easy, I consider it worthless. The only thing that has value in my life when it comes to touching gold is the sweat that's dripping off the end of your nose as you're touching that gold. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, I'm tracking this. It made me think of Midas, the touch of Midas's touch, right? When you anything you touch turns to gold. That's a curse. That's not actually a benefit. It's the fact that if everything you touch turns to gold, then all your food turns to gold, all your people you love turns to gold, and you can't use it at that point because you have an overabundance, right? It becomes, you lose the value in it because there's no scarcity to it. I'm loving where you're going with that, Seb. Oh,
Well, the problem with that is, sorry, Seb, is that the touching gold that was granted to Midas or cursed to Midas it was an overnight thing. Bam! Now everything you touch turns to gold. What I'm describing is a trajectory that is 60 years old. It took 60 years for me to finally hear from my good friend a random snippet of observation about what he tells people about me. Like, I didn't know he was saying that about me until January. So it appeared after 60 years. It wasn't like invoked on me overnight, like, bam, you've got magical properties. Everything you touch turns to gold. I don't think of it that way. And by the way, again, I'm raising this touch and turns to gold thing, like super uncomfortable, but to make a point that if things are turning to gold, if you're involved with them, you had to dig underground in a gold mine for most of your life to find gold flecks to turn them into gold. And so it's just not an overnight thing. Midas is a cool story, but that was an overnight thing. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, that's what I'm referring to, is the fact that because of Midas' touch, it becomes a curse due to the fact that it's an overnight thing. He doesn't have to work for any of it, which means that there's no scarcity to it. And I think that's the key. It's with hard work, is that it's a scarce thing. Hard work. The gold at the end of the tunnel, when you go down to the mine and you work your ass off and you get all the gold flecks and melt them down into a single gold bar, that takes a ton of work. Not being able to just walk over and touch a hot dog and be like, now I have gold hot dog, right? I think that's the key. Seb, what do you got?
I turned a lot of things to mud before they ever turned into gold. It's like, I mean, I got a pile of mud in my yard, in the last 47 years, and I, it is interesting how some of these sort of, and this obviously this statement was made by a close friend and all of the things, so that this here wasn't the case. But I just want to bring attention to a point that generally can happen when people are seemingly doing certain things with ease, or seemingly having a greater time accomplishing certain things like working out or a variety of other things. It could be anything you set your mind to. But you have to be very careful that in justifying your own iniquities, you don't start imposing onto others that they somehow, were gifted, or that it's easy for you to wake up in the morning to go train because you're an early riser. And then, because you can go down this victimhood rabbit hole where you're projecting all these things on everybody as to why people are successful and you're not. And the idea isn't to take away from them, but it's to add to you, to your own self-belief, and to your own counteracting your sense of insecurity. And so good example of this, there's an excellent book called Talent is Overrated, and it spoke to a variety of different athletes and musicians and all of the things, and one of them was, of course, Tiger Woods, right? And one of the statement that was consistent with Tiger Woods was like, he's one of the most gifted golfer to ever lived. Well, okay. So his dad was a Green Beret, the first black Green Beret, actually. And he trained him, 100, 200, 300 balls a day since he was 3 years old, right? And so now you've just, I'm taking him as an example. I'm not saying he's a stellar human in all realms of life, but I'm just saying, he in this specific sliver of his life, he's done a fantastic job because of the work that he's put in. It's unquestionable. Yet most detractors, or the people that are supporting him, oftentimes will revert to, he's a gifted athlete or he's a gifted golfer, and it's less about Tiger and it is more about themselves. Because otherwise, if that's the case, then what has prevented me from doing the thing that I want to, materialize? And so I think it's always good practice to catch ourselves doing that when it happens, because if you catch yourself doing that and you override it, then it sort of, it allows you a more somber, more humble approach towards the things and the failures that perhaps, or the failures that you are facing and the amount of work that you're willing to put in to achieve certain outcomes. And you also, with the same hand, you're preventing from taking away from other people that are doing certain things to achieve certain outcomes. Not sure if that makes sense.
Yep, I think I'm tracking for sure. I actually had somebody tell me the other day, they were all like, "Man, you have a really great radio voice. It's nice and smooth when you're on the podcast. When you speak, it's very clear and concise, and all these other things." And I kind of giggled because I realized that I'm creeping up on like 700 podcasts that I've done for the Tools for the Toolbox and the Collective and the Goldmine and other podcasts and all these other things. Those are just like, it's all the reps. You go back to my very first podcast on Tools for the Toolbox, it is horrific compared to now. But that first one was that was the step in. That was the leap of faith. That was the, I have an idea and I'm going to try it and go from there. And I wanted to touch on this because we wrote it down from last week as well, is that there's a point where you have to surrender to the process, right? You can't, there's the initial step in of like, yep, I'm going to take that leap of faith. I'm going to do that thing. And then you're going to suck at it for quite a while. And you have to, at some point, at least I had to do this, was let go of the outcomes, let go of the, what I believe should happen or will happen, or this is what I want and that's what I think. And but you just have to just let it go. Allow for time to pass, allow for practice to take hold of you, and the process will churn out what it churns out. And I think that kind of surrendering to the moment is a key part of a free flow, but also taking a leap of faith and building a skill set. And when you talk about Tiger Woods, we did a podcast a couple weeks ago on talent. and we came down to basically the same thing: was where does talent lie, and how much pre-work gets put into that? Because if you really want to dive deep into this, yes, Tiger Woods' dad was a Green Beret, so all of his training and all of his decision making and all of the skill sets that he acquired through his life then gets bled into Tiger, right? And then how much of that is talent, how much of that is hard work? It was a great conversation. Shaun, you got any thoughts on any of this?
I do. So, you're talking about the process, Chance, and how you surrendered to the process. And it's not that I'm challenging you, Chance. Maybe you've got it all figured out. I'll challenge the statement, because the statement is actually incorrect. Because a lot of people don't know what the process is. And I don't want to say you don't know what the process is, Chance, because maybe you do. Maybe I don't know what the process is. I don't know. What is the process? You know what I'm saying? Everyone throws out the idea, the process, but no one really defines what the process is. Here's my definition of how to understand the process. Pick something, anything. Do it for a really long time and win a whole bunch of times, and lose a whole bunch of times. But at the end of the process, you've got to have a body of work that people step back and say, that was world class. I don't think you can definitively or categorically explain to anyone in the world what the process is unless you've been in a process a really long time to understand what a process is. 1 year, 2 year, 3 years, 7 years. That's not long enough to deeply understand a process. Talking in decades is a way to understand a process, not months. And so a lot of people struggle in the process because they haven't been involved in a thing long enough deeply to understand the nuances of a process. And if they haven't been in it deeply and long enough, then how do they understand the process? Well, perhaps they start asking around. Maybe their neighbor is explaining process to them now, but their neighbor who started BJJ a year and a half ago is now explaining process through something that they haven't been involved in decades long enough to really understand how to well explain process. And so I've seen over the years, particularly because of social media, that people will get into the game of learning something new, and within weeks, they're explaining a process like they're a subject matter expert, because nowadays, weeks is the equivalent of years, in a sense. I hope you understand.
Yeah, I'm tracking. Seb, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I do. I'm going to push back a bit on this one for the sake of the conversation moving and flowing. But ultimately, I don't completely disagree with that. One thing I do disagree with is that there are plenty of people out there that do something for 20 years and never engage in it. And all they do is cementing how bad they are at that something. And there's a lot of people that come into a process, as you have, Shaun, fully engage, researching all of the things, reading all of the things, talking to all the right people, doing all of the practicum, and doing all of the things that you need to do to get better. Well, it's quite. Let's take, for example, the analogy that you made with jiu-jitsu, right? As it stands right now, there are blue belts walking around that killed world-class black belt that have been doing jiu-jitsu for 40 years, right? There is a different level of engagement in that development of that game that there was for the guy that did it for 40 years. And I'm not taking away from the guys that did it for 40 years because they likely had a life, sometimes if you want to, you need a temporary state of obsession to reach, the pinnacle of the sport. And that's in almost anything. And so time spent is a very linear or human concept. There's a lot more than just linear time to make somebody very, very good at what they do. If they engage fully in it, and they've been doing it for a very long time, good luck. You're not catching up. right? Like that's not going to happen. But the question is what velocity were they engaged in for how long? And so for me, I don't just take it at face value that because somebody has done something for a long time, they've done it right. Because there's plenty of people on autopilot doing things their entire life, and really they've never scratched the surface of the very thing that they've been involved in for the rest of their life.
Mm.
I agree with that. And I don't even consider that a pushback. I just consider that as added nuance that like really builds it out into more of a three-dimensional model. And so success then as an example, and this is just a working real-time conversation flow, then success or the successful understanding of a process is probably the replication of a successful process to create several successful outcomes that are non-related to each other, only related to each other through the actual process. So you learn how to do a process, you engage in a process, you get good at a process. Now that process is, you can replicate it throughout the rest of your life. And so initially I'd said poorly that you've got to do something long enough, win enough, and lose enough that you understand how to work the process. Once you understand the way, I'll call it, now the way is replicated throughout the rest of your life in any trajectory that you want. And so, if you're an Olympian at the age of 25, you had to go through a process that taught you how to be successful to a high enough level that you should be able to take the way and apply it anywhere else in your life. The only thing that holds you back from being successful in all of those other things is perhaps not having the fully distilled understanding of your why you're doing it. Your why was you wanted an Olympic medal, but your next career, your next trajectory, you've got all the processes, you've got all of the youth, you've got all of the energy, but you're unsuccessful in that new trajectory because you didn't have a why. And so free flow is process, free flow is experience, free flow is many things, but fundamentally, you're not flowing unless you know why you're here right now. There's no flow unless you know who you are.
That's a good point. And I got a thought on it. I'm just going to hit a couple of quick comments. Tyler Pelkey jumped in here earlier. He said, believe in your why and purpose, and you can take on anything. DR7606 jumped in, said, hard work and adversity builds confidence in you and your abilities. At least that's my experience in life, and I appreciate it every day. It's a great point. Teresa Coulter jumped in here, said, when we are deeply involved in trying to reach a goal or an activity that is challenging but well suited to our skills, we experience a joyful state called flow. And to your point, Shaun, I wrote down here replication degradation. And there's a point on this that I want to touch on, is that if you just take a process and you replicate it exactly, and then again and again and again, it's going to degrade over time. And so I think that's where I was trying to come from with the surrendering to that process, is that if I replicate A to B, let's say my podcasting skills to jujitsu, they have certain things that I can apply to each other, but they're not exactly the same thing. So if I try to replicate them exactly, there's going to be degradation. And so it's on me to allow myself to learn the new skills while still applying the old skills, if that makes sense. And I think that's a
I
critical
just want
part
to
of
change
this.
the word though. It's not
What do you got?
skills. It's not skills. You're not learning new skills to apply to the old skills to build out your skills. What you're doing is you've got your old process, you're in a new process, and you're building out a bigger process or a clearer process or a more
Yes.
robust process or a nuanced process or whatever. But it's not skills. Skills come and go. You know, you learn how to shoot a pistol, you learn how to shoot it super fast. Now you're super fast and super accurate, and now you're like the best shot in the world. The following day, you start a new career. How's your trigger pull work for your water cooler moment in the cubicle space that you just started. None of those skills apply. What does apply is your deeper understanding of who you are and how you work. Not just how you work for yourself, but how you work with other humans, how you work in this three-dimensional external space that we operate in. Those are the things that to me are more interesting with free flow. If you can go deep enough into something that you start to experience the flow zone, or you're in the flow, then you can do that anywhere else in your life, in anything, once you become comfortable with what flow means to you. But skills don't get you into flow. Understanding who you are in the real time is what gets you into flow.
Yep. Yeah, that's a great clarification. You're absolutely right. I think the skills was definitely the wrong word. Seb, you got any points on this? No?
Not really, no. Nothing of value.
Right to that. Now, one other point I want to touch on before we jump out of here is I wrote down here antennas from last week. And we were talking about how I was talking about the post that I had put out a few weeks ago on resonance and the fact that, sometimes you can pick up on these things. And then you find certain people that seem to pick up on the things that you really enjoy or you're really working on. This is a great example. The three of us sitting here talking about free flowing through a show, and the ability to, I guess, receive and connect with other people throughout the world while you're doing the things that you want to do, right? Like the building of the collective is one great example. I've said this many times, is that we've had friends of friends of friends of friends of friends on the show who recommended the original friend that started that sequence off, right? And it slowly becomes this big circle. And I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on picking up signals, how to absorb the world and utilize it to the best of your ability. Seb, I see that smile. What do you got?
I was actually laughing because Shaun is really good at this, but yeah, it's really interesting. You in order for you to be able to sort of grab vibrational pull or be aware of it, is you need to be aware of your own vibration. You need to be aware of your own reality, and I think that's where it starts, and once you're sort of secure, and secure doesn't mean that you got life figured out, because we don't. Secure only means that you understand enough to know when you're being pulled somewhere, or when there's certain things that are calling your name, or people even. There is science behind that, and there is spirituality behind that. Both of those things are intersected and not pulling in opposite direction, as was once believed. But I do believe that having an understanding of who you are, and for you to be where you ought to be in the right place at the right time, is critical to constructing and really engaging in these connections. You have to, first of all, you have to be out there, and you have to be open to it. You have to have an open mind. Second, you need to be out there for the right reasons, and put out the right vibe, so to speak. And the way you do that is by being authentic. That's all you need to do. Like, you don't need to be something that you're not. You just need to be authentic. And that's one of the vibrations that is very, very easily decipherable if you are not. And people will, you'll attract people like people, and you're going to attract people that you don't want around you, or you're going to end up putting people off, or putting them away, or having them not wanting to be a part of it. So at the end of the day, we spoke about the intangibles earlier, and we could do a million shows on the intangibles when it comes to life and the universe and all of the things. But we know somehow inherently that as you're doing things for the right reasons, with no underlying want or needs or desire, and and when I say no, I don't mean none whatsoever. Obviously, you want it to make a difference, so therefore you want something. It could be argued. But what I am talking about is you're putting something out that is much, much bigger than you as an individual, and it has reverberation. I've used this example time and time again. When you're investing in your leadership, for example, or any skill that allows you to be better at human contact. When you had a human contact with somebody in the morning, that person has contact with somebody else. That person reflects the contact they had with you. That person reflects it to two other. Then the other one is a teacher and reflects it to 30 people. And then those 30 people go out in the yard and they reflect it on other kids. So I think that, to make a very, very long answer, short answer long, as I'm very good at that, is to essentially be authentic and be there for the right reasons and be open to what's around. Be open to what's around you and not feel threatened. And if you are feeling threatened, then address why you are feeling threatened. All of the things that are filters that are preventing you from connecting with the right people, the right time, the right place, doing the right thing.
This is I just wrote down this stuck on send. It's that, anybody that's used radio comms before, there's times where people are just stuck on send and they're just talking and talking. You can't hear, you can't break through, you can't engage anybody else because you're stuck on send. And I think, to your point, Seb, that's a beautiful point. You can't be stuck on send. You have to be able to receive as well as transmit. Shaun, you got any thoughts on this?
I do. I've got lots of thoughts, but I'm going to throw this back to you, Chance. You asked Seb a question, and he answered it. Now, think of the question and rephrase it in a different way so we've got a different angle. What's your question?
Well, now you got to make me remember the question when I start. I'm drawing a blank on that, on the actual question itself. So
okay, no worries.
What do you got?
I was just throwing a twist in there. So, in respect to what Seb said, and I think this is an important aspect, and perhaps it's because, as you asked me the question, Chance, I was thinking about how does free flow pertain to what I was trying to relay earlier on in the show, and that is, it takes time, lifetime, to understand what flow means to you. You can watch you can watch Tiger Woods flow with a golf club, and that doesn't mean that you understand flow, free flow. You're just observing without understanding. Understanding free flow academically is different than understanding it deep inside of you, and that takes a lot of action, takes a lot of practice, a lot of wins and losses to understand free flow for you. So, with that said, that it takes time, I was thinking about ultra endurance racing, 24-hour solos. In a 24-hour race, if you're racing every single second of 24 hours, it feels like a week. It feels like a week of racing, not just a full day of racing. And so every second or every minute that you're out there, time takes on a different value. It takes on like a really uncomfortable value of, I cannot believe how fatigued I am, and I cannot believe how raw my arse is. All of these little things that kind of help you understand time is relative to how uncomfortable you are, or how tired you are, or how hard you've been working. Free flow is something that takes a really long time, and if it's a costly time, if there was cost attached to that time, then free flow again has another nuanced meaning. So, if it takes a long time to understand free flow, and there has to be a cost paid or a price paid to understand free flow, then how is everyone learning how to free flow by reading a book? How would you learn about free flowing in life by listening to this podcast? You can't understand free flow through a conversation, even though right now we're free flowing. As a listener, the things that we've said today are perhaps curiosities for you, or are perhaps little hooks in your mind that are making you think, maybe I didn't understand free flow. But none of that is going to teach you free flow. You have to teach you free flow. And you won't know it by the end of today. That's the disappointing part. It takes years to understand free flow for you. You have to take the time to learn you. And eventually, your responsibility is to teach free flow to others. And You won't ever be able to do that if you've only got half an hour of free flow learning in your pocket. A lifetime of free flow will teach you how to free flow.
I am digging this, and we are just about an hour, man. That time, this hour just flew by. So I just want to say thank you guys, because this is a great addition to last week's show. And if you didn't get to watch last week's show and you're just hitting this for the first time, I recommend go back, watch the other one as well. There's so many good points on this, so at least then you have 2 hours of free flow knowledge that you can pull from and then move forward. So let's get some final thoughts. Actually, before I do final thoughts, I have this comment I just want to hit on real quick. Sandy Baker jumped in here, said, so stoked I got to tune in for this for my commute to work this afternoon. Thank you, gentlemen, for all your infinite wisdom. So many gold nuggets in this conversation. I would say that we have finite wisdom. I don't know about infinite wisdom. And then Mike jumped on here real quick after, said, good conversation, guys. Thanks very much. I really appreciate it as well. Seb, any final thoughts? Anything still lingering in the back of that brain?
Yeah, I'll bring a bit more nuance to what Shaun just said in the last last inject there. He's absolutely correct in that the wheels need to meet the pavement in order for you to develop free flow. What you are doing when you're watching the collective is getting a bit of technical knowledge that you're able to apply against reality, and that needs to happen. So you can't just listen to this and hope that you're going to get everything out of it that you should. It's technical knowledge applied against your reality. It will help speed up the process. If you don't have any of that, and if there are certain things that you're sort of concepts that we discussed that you should be going into, then that opens up a whole new can of potential technical knowledge that you can tap into to apply against your reality and become that person faster.
You do need some theory in order to be able to use practical knowledge. Absolutely. Shaun, any final thoughts?
Yep, like Seb said, you do need theory, but you do need adaptive pressure dynamics. You need to apply enough pressure in your life that throughout your life you're adapting to the dynamic situation called real time that you're living in right now. Your outcomes years from now will be a result of your ability to engage in adaptive pressure dynamics. Of course, you don't know that there's adaptive pressure dynamics every second of your life unless you sit down and think about that for a moment and how to play with it. And so, free flow is a result of you striking a balance between doing and thinking, doing and understanding. Both of those things have to happen. Maybe not simultaneously, but that's nice if it does. But both of those things have to happen in order for you to understand free flow. If you don't have action and you don't have that consideration or that introspection or that reflection on your action, that loop of improvement, if you aren't doing that, then all you're doing is academically reading about or listening to the subject of free flow. It requires pedal to the metal, rubber to the road. It requires you doing something about the concept. The concept won't take you to outcomes. Only work will take you to outcomes.
That's a beautiful point. The only thing I have to add on that is just a quick little blurb that I wrote down here is if you think without doing, it's fantasy. If you're doing without thinking, then your outcomes will surprise you. So, like you said, you got to do both. You got to think and do. And hopefully that way you can learn, build, and then grow. See y'all next week.
Chimo.
Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.